We are very pleased to be joined by Dr. Nicole Arbour today. Dr. Nicole is currently External Relations Manager at International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IASA, where she plays an active role in building and maintaining relationships with IASA's national and regional member organizations. Welcome, Nicole, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Just to get started, my first question is, how did you get into science diplomacy, and how has your role evolved during all these years, and now working with IASA? What does your current position entail?
My role has evolved quite significantly. So I started off in graduate studies thinking that I was going to grow up and be a research scientist like many other people who start their PhD. But that didn't quite work out the way I planned. I ended up first in the private sector working for a small biotech company. And from there, I moved to the British High Commission, where I actually worked in science diplomacy. I worked as a science attaché for the UK government, coordinating science between Canadian scientists and UK scientists, building links and bridges and collaborations. And from there, I moved to the NRC, but still in a very similar role. So throughout my career, I've worked in the international space, building bridges between Canada and mostly Canada and the UK, predominantly, also Canada and other countries. And then in my final role in Canada, I worked with a lot of multilateral organizations as well. And that's what brought me to IASA. So when I was thinking about my career development, I thought that I wanted to get experience in an international organization. So I'd seen what it looked like from one national organization to another national organization in lots of bilateral relationships. I'd worked for a national organization looking into international organizations. And what I was looking for is looking from an international organization and back, just to get sort of a practical view of how this all worked. But what I wouldn't describe myself as an expert in science policy per se. I'm more of a practical science policy person. So there are many different definitions for science, what science diplomacy is. Most notably, there's the Royal Society of London definition that was created in 2009, and most recently there was another more sort of practical definition. And while all of these definitions are very accurate, my experience has been that a lot of this type of activity is a lot more complex than we pull it apart, and it's often influenced by very many overlapping and interrelated factors. In my current role as External Relations Manager for IASA, also known as the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, I work with our national member organization. So IASA is a international research organization that tackles current policy relevant wicked problems through systems analysis, so complex systems analysis. And we have national member structures. So different countries are members of that structure. And it was really born out of an international vision to build diplomatic bridges across the Cold War. So if you look at the IASA website, you can get all of the details on that. But the idea is that IASA brings together a wide range of scientific skills, provides science-based insights into critical policy issues. And my role is to work with our member countries to make sure that information that they get access to that information, that they understand what the value of their relationship with IASA is, and to sort of work at or to solidify the external relations, so the international relations between IASA and our member community, and also to bring in other members where people and in a way that they recognize what the value of IASA is and are looking to gain access to that.
Congratulations, Nicole, for the incredible work you are doing. So 2020 has been an unprecedented year for the entire scientific community, and COVID-19 took the world by surprise. Science diplomacy has become a crucial dimension to answer this crisis. How do you think pandemic like COVID-19 can shape the next era of science diplomacy, where we need a spirit of solidarity, cooperation, and coordination, and we don't want to leave anyone behind? And the lessons we have learned so far and the way to move forward for other future global challenges that may arise in time ahead.
So, I mean, how has it shaped what we've seen? How has science diplomacy shaped, and how has COVID-19 shaped the next era of science diplomacy? Well, I mean, I think what COVID-19 has taught us is that the world has complexity and interdependencies that need to be understood, that we didn't necessarily think about before, that we weren't taking into consideration. In fact, we were taking for granted. But when you start shutting down borders, when you start closing, shutting down different economic value chains, we saw some of those trickle down effects. And so part of one of the things that COVID-19 has one of the lessons that we've learned is, I think, though I may be biased, that there is a very big need for systems thinking. We need to think about all of the interdependencies. It made us aware of the gaps in our system, and we need to take a step back and really evaluate how all of the different pieces that make up our human system work together, and think about how we build policies to incorporate the different ways that these all fit together. So I think it's going to make us reevaluate the mechanisms, the institutions, and the ways that we work, and make us think outside the box a little bit more and develop new and innovative ways. We also need to think about the organizations that exist and how they engage with government. So different science advisory mechanisms do exist, but are they being effective? Are they effectively engaging with their governments? Are they effectively engaging with the international dialogue? I think the other piece that is interesting and that needs to be thought about is that we need a stronger need. We have a need for need to better incorporate forecasting, foresighting activities into our systems development, but also into our policy development process. We need to plan not only for sort of the near term, but we need to plan for longer term challenges and consequences and outcomes of the decisions we're making in the present. I think that the other thing that we can see, even sort of from the way that all of this is coming together and has come together, is that there is influence from different individuals and actors, and we as a science community have to be part of that influence chain. We have to engage with all of these different actors, and sometimes for scientists, that's not necessarily part of their comfort zone.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole, for sharing your views. So also, it leads me to what do you think about the importance of trust, public trust and engagement for effective science diplomacy, as you have already submitted an editorial with CSPC saying, do not forget the human. So what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, well, so I mean, as you mentioned, the editorial, it's very much, I feel that everything is about public trust. And public trust is key to a huge part of the problems we face. People don't often think of who is our audience and who is our public. Everyday and local actors are not the same as decision makers. So the people who are taking decisions at the top aren't also necessarily making the decisions into reality on the bottom. And so where is that community engagement in that co-creation? When we're thinking about what solutions are going to be applicable in what environments, and we also have to think about, what decisions and what policies are going to work in one space and not in another. And so even within the science diplomacy community, we need to think about who is our audience. We need to think about, are we engaging with the decision makers? Are we engaging with the public? Are we acting as the knowledge broker between the two in some cases? And I think part of the challenge that we face is that there really needs to be scientific literacy in order for us to be able to counteract some of the other challenges we face, like a lot of sort of what is often called fake news or misdirecting, misinformation. People who understand how science works have more and feel like they relate to the scientists will have more trust in that. Most of our structures are based on some sort of democratic mechanism. So essentially, everyone is voting based on the information that they receive and is most convincing. And we have to make sure that science is part of that. Our everyday actors are not the same as decision makers, as I mentioned, but they're the ones who actually are going to make this work. So our global challenges require huge cultural changes. If we think about it from a COVID-19 perspective, even the way you or I or your neighbor or your mother decides to wear or not to wear their mask is going to make an effect on the long-term outcome. You can think about waste reduction. So how are different cities, municipalities, governments thinking about building composting programs? Do they work? Is there public trust in them? Is the public buying in? Are they doing these things? Our transport choices. So all of these things require buy-in from our communities. And if we don't make an effort to make sure that there is an effective level of science literacy and that there is an effective level of science engagement with the community base, we're going to have a very hard time delivering on some of the promises we made under the SDGs, among others.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Science communication is, in fact, yes, the most important thing now to move everyone of us to get through this COVID. So CSPC is going virtual this year, and it would be a new experience and actually an opportunity for most of us to reach a wider audience. What are you most looking forward to the conference?
Wow, that's actually a very big question, because there's a lot of things I'm looking forward to. So firstly, I find that this year's conference themes resonate quite particularly with me, because I'm very interested in the foresight, horizon scanning, forecasting. So really thinking about, how do we think about that future that we want to get to? I think forward thinking is very important and plays into the need to develop effective policies to tackle all of the world's wicked problems. This year's CSPC will also be much more of an international science policy party. There seems to be a lot more engagement. Being virtual means that it's more accessible for a lot of players that may not have been able to participate before. And so it's kind of interesting to see how the Canadian Science Policy Conference is going to be wider. And I look forward to seeing how that's going to play out in real time. And then, of course, I happen to be working on two panels. One of them is around one is entitled Helping Societies Address Cascading Climate Risk. And it's really a policy simulation. So this is an experiment. I'm very excited about this experiment. And we're going to see how that plays out. And then another one really touches on that idea of the future. So thinking about the future, importance of imagining the future for horizon scanning, foresight, scenario mapping in a rapidly changing wicked world. And so there's actually a lot for me to look forward to in this conference. I think it's going to be a fun experiment, because it's the first time CSPC has gone virtual. So we'll see how it all goes.
Lastly, is there anything that you're currently working on, or any closing remarks that you would like to share? And where can we go and read more about your work and your organization?
Yes. So, I mean, you ask someone about what are they doing that's super cool and that they should share with the world. So first thing I would say is that IIASA as an institution is something that everybody should take a look at. So if you go to IIASA, IIASA.ac.at, you'll be able to get an idea of what IIASA is as an institution, because I'm biased, but I think it's a fascinating institution. It's based on both principles of science diplomacy and science policy. It's really aims to be that practical link between evidence and policymaking. And so that from that perspective, the whole institution and everything we do is really cool. But like I said, mildly biased. But the other thing that's been really interesting throughout the pandemic is, early on in the pandemic, IIASA, the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, and the ISC, or the International Science Council, pulled together this consultative science platform that they call Bouncing Forward Sustainably, Pathways to a Post-COVID World. And what this did was it brought thought leaders from across the globe in research, government, and the private sector to discuss challenges that are going to come out of the post-COVID sustainability era. And so these were pulled together in 3 sets of consultations under 4 themes. So strengthening science systems, sustainable energy, governments for sustainability, and resilient food systems. They're all on the website, so I would invite everybody to go and take a look. But it's been a fascinating process, but there's also some really interesting reporting that's coming out of that. So I think it's an example of how IIASA works as a bit of a platform, as a convener, if you will, working with partners like ISC, who has also very, very strong convening power, to really have thought-provoking discussions with leaders from across the globe, bringing together international parties. So I think, those are some of the things that I think are really worth checking out.
Thank you, Nicole, so much for sharing your views and joining us today. Thank you so much. And we are looking forward to see you at the conference. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much as well.